Well, Dan, we'll try to take this thing another step further. I'll start on the north end of the village and try to name the people that lived in various houses as we go south. Now, okay, we'll start out where well, today it's Mini Martin Pete. Used to be a grill out there. And during Prohibition, that was a tea room. And then when the Prohibition got over with, Andy Bezic took it over. It was owned by his aunt. He lived right across the road in that greenhouse fella that sells bait. And then the gas station was put in there. I don't know whether Hank Clayton was the first one to operate it or not. I think he was. Well, then we start down towards the high school. Of course, everybody knows the high school went in there in '36. Before that, it was all farmland. And that little stone house that the school still owned is where Ray White used to live. He was a plumber. And his biggest thing was copper pipe. And that was when copper pipe was first coming in. Okay, the next place would be where Ike Brewster lives. I think a Raymond lives in there now. Well, Ike used to haul the mail from the depot up to the post office. He had one horse. Of course, for the amount of mail, that's all he needed. And the next place south would be Willie Collins. And Willie ran a Texaco gas station. Well, that's where the dentist is now. He had a small business in there. And let's see. The next one is where Jim Smith is now. That was, she was a school teacher in Auburn. I can't think of her name right now. But, and I think her father was a plumber. And the next place is where Fred Lampkin started the bee business, and he sold it to the Davis brothers. And then we come to the mill pond. Now there used to be a house down by the pond, and the foundation is still visible if you look close enough, fairly close to the sidewalk. And just beyond it, well, there used to be a road. I think they called it Mill Street, on the south side of the mill pond. Of course, that's been closed off for years. And just beyond that was where Ed Frank had his funeral home. That house has been ripped out and long gone. Then the next place, just this side of the Big M, is where the guy that ran the printing press and published the Union Springs Advertiser lived. I had to come back to that. And then next, between there and the corner, was where the Union Springs High School was. Now, as we cross over Green Street, the house there on the corner was the manse for the Methodist Church. And the next place was built by Earl Turney in the 30s. And that house, the basement, was dug out with a slip scoop and a pair of horses, which you probably never hear of today. And then, of course, the library. And Let's see, just beyond the library there was a house in the corner that the bank bought to put their parking lot in. And then we got the Methodist church. And there was a house between the Methodist church and the Astoria Hotel. Kenny Gardner used to live in. And that's been ripped out and long gone. And then we got the Astoria Hotel. That was owned by O'Brien, Frank O'Brien. I think his brother-in-law worked with it. And then we got the old red and white store. And it was above the red and white store where Frank B.A. first set up his roto salt operations. He had office space up there. And I believe that was also a bakery run by Fred Guile before Earl Turney took it over. And then next where the beauty parlor is now used to be a bank run by George Backus. I guess he did pretty good until the Depression came along. He lost out then. And then we got the hardware where Napa took over. And where the pharmacy is, that used to be I think that was a billiard hall or a pool hall. It had 2-3 pool tables in there. And Daggett ran it. And the next one I believe was a feed store. You could buy chicken mash. There was a lot of people in town that had their own flock of chickens at that time. And let's see, where are we? Oh, the market basket was in there. I'm not sure whether the feed store came next or the market basket, but one or the other. Fred Chalabo ran the market basket. That's where you could get 3 5-cent candy bars for a dime. Then we got Doremus and the first pharmacy in town. Oh yeah, to back up just a bit, where the pharmacy is now, that has always been the Masonic building as far as I know. The Masons owned it, and they used to rent out the lower floors. I worked in there for 3 years for General Products when they were expanding. Okay, let's see, just beyond the drugstore. There used to be, I can remember Wilson had a restaurant in there for a while. That didn't last too long. Monty Stamp took it over for a barber shop. He had one side and his wife had the other. Barber shop and beauty parlor. And then the store on the corner used to be an IGA store run by, well, Marble first, then Jack Clark took it over. And I worked for Jack for a couple of years when I was about, 12 or 14. And then we crossed the intersection there of Factory Street. And John Murphy had his shoe store right on the corner. And then there was I think the next store was part of the Johnson building. That was vacant. It had been, haberdashery or clothing store or something, but it was vacant for years there. And then I think Evan Beebe comes in there. He ran a barber shop, and his brother went fishing every day. But he had a good reason. My understanding that he was the one that perfected the wire rim on automobile tires, and he lived off of the royalties from that. And then let's see, I guess the next door down was Winnie. He had I think, a bicycle repair shop or something. There wasn't much going on when I was a kid, and then the next door was another barber shop, Burt Myers. And the next one was I don't know what you call it, delicatessen. You buy ice cream cones, odds and ends. And then the next one down was a garage run by the Walters, Frank Walters. Usually had some of his brothers around there. And they had the garage on the first section, the second section's where they lived. And then they had the Union Springs Advertiser, where they printed the village paper. I still can't think of the name of it. Then where the fire department are at present is what we call the burnt district. There had been stores in there, and they burned out, and nothing was done with it until the fire department took it over. And then the next garage is where Gordon Palmer started out. That was his first garage. And then just south of him was that was a meat market. Ernie Hubbard ran it for a while. Travis Robbins had it for a while. And they've had quite a few businesses in. And then right on the corner was the post office that Elsie Webb was postmistress at that time. And then as you cross over Basin Street, there was a 3-story hotel on the corner. I think they called it the old Bertram House. And then Ernie Jobson's garage was next. And let's see, the garage, there's a street down to the town barn, or what was the town barn then. And Bud took over pretty much the next building, lived up overhead, and the fire department were next to him. And then just south of the fire department was the old Baptist church, which Mrs. Myers bought. I guess she lived there. She and her barber husband lived there for a long time. Of course, that's all down and gone now. And then Doc Woodford, he's owned that house as far back as I can remember. And let's see, I don't remember who was in the next one. And then Frank B.A. And Frank had a greenhouse. And of course, back in the 30s, the greenhouse he had was comparable to what some of the big flower growers have. And right next to him was a house that's been ripped out of there. It wasn't much of anything to brag about. It was long and narrow, and I think it was rented out most of the time. And the next is the old stone house where Fordyce had his first doctor. And let's see, I can remember when Bill Murray lived there. The next house was where Lake Smith. Next one down was where Abe Winnie. And then we get into the Bradleys, where Walt Conley lives now, was owned by Bradley. Can't remember her name, but I guess she owned, oh crap, a dozen houses right there in a bunch. And the next house down the street was another one of hers, and there was another one of hers between that house and the lake. And then where Kirkpatrick is, that was another Bradley house. It was also the street that went down to, they had a tea room down in there. And it was a place where they always held the alumni banquets. And it was supposed to be, you know, one of the better places in town. And let's see, there's another place in there that I'm not sure who owned it. And then the next one, I believe, was the Graves place. And the next one was owned by George Ragsdale. That's the one where Seidenberg, the dentist, lived. And there used to be a good-sized barn between the house and the road, a little bit to the south. And I can't remember how, but it had quite a fire, and that place just took off and was gone. And let's see, and then the next place is Marco Heck's father built that house. I guess Gordon Palmer owned it last I knew. About the extent, the west side of the road. You want to backtrack a little, down where Castelli is, that used to be the Fordyce Coal and Lumber Yard. There was a huge ice house that they used to fill every winter. And I can just remember the last winter it was in use. And then out on a point, there was what they called a steamboat landing. There was two places these barges could come in on either side of the steamboat. And the steamboat was really a granary. They bought grain and sold it. I guess if the winters were hard enough, they used to send a grain across the lake by horse and toboggan. And the reason they sent it across the lake was the railroad went through on the west side of Cuba Lake before we had it on the east side. So they'd send their grain over to Romulus, I guess, and ship it out from there. And a lot of those buildings that are still down there, they were built either for coal or for lumber. And then they had a barn up in back where they kept the horses that they used. In the winter time, they delivered the coal by bobsled. Horses, the creameries. Well, going back north, the creamery we bought next. And my dad worked there. Well, I had pretty near free run of that place. In the summertime, I'd go down swimming. I'd stop back at the creamery and go in the cooler and help myself to ice cold buttermilk. Oh, that was delicious. And if I was there at the right time, they used to let me open the wheel and turn the power on to churn butter. And on certain days, they used to cut butter and wrap it. They sold butter to, oh crap, about a dozen different places in Auburn and Syracuse. And then, of course, everybody knows now that the old depot is our new village office, which I think is a very good use of it. I believe it was Cowles that ran the Union Springs paper. I know Harold Stryker married their only daughter, and they were the ones that got out of it. Harold went to work for Alco in Auburn doing war work on early 40s. Well, let's go back out north. We'll start on the corner. Well, let's go up around the corner to old Orrin Hendrickson. He lives where Bill Grove now lives. And he raised a bunch of chickens. I guess sold eggs. And he was the biggest liar in 10 counties. He used to tell about going fishing. And he hooked onto such a big fish, it drew him in a boat pretty near from one end of the lake to the other. And he could tell all this with a straight face. Well, then we come back down to the corner, and Dan Wheeler lived on the south corner. I think Dan was a carpenter, and he always had a big garden, sold produce right there at the house, had a flock of chickens, sold eggs right there, and that was about the way he made his living. I think his daughter still owns the place. Jane, she graduated with my sister. Okay, going south, there were a couple of, well, I don't know what you call them, houses or shacks between there and where Emily Mayer lives. The old stone house up there. But when I was a kid, Hopkins owned it. And we used to have our church picnics up there in the summertime. And, oh yeah, I almost forgot. We had a flying preacher for a while. His hangar was right across the road from Emily Mayer's, where the fire department have their carnival. And he used to fly around around the country with he was a flying preacher until he landed in the big oak tree right behind Emily Mayer's house. I can remember going up there, and here's the plane up in the tree. At least, thank God, he didn't get hurt. But that was about the end of his flying. So then we come on back down to Route 90, and let's see, where that little road goes up just south of Emily's house. On that corner used to be a humongous hay barn, and a buddy of mine from Aurora come down one Saturday, and he had a Benjamin air rifle. Yeah, we went up there, and I don't know how many pigeons we killed. Somebody he knew it that was a teacher at Wells, I guess, liked pigeons. Well, Oliver sold the pigeons to him, and I ended up getting about $4 out of the deal, and there was 3 of us that had to split the money. Then we come on down. There was nothing more until you got to the red brick house where Carl Yager lives. That since has been made over into apartment houses. And old Carl, he could tell you how many bricks there was in that building. He had quite a line of baloney. Let's see, he had 2 cows for a while, sold his milk down to the creamery, and he was shipping 2 cans a day down to the creamery. It was about 90% water. And then right across the street is where Joe Honorati lived. My God, I don't know. They lived there for a good many years. Bessie was 95 or so when she passed that. And then the place I live in, the old Ed Cater place, Ed bought this place around 1900, 1897 or something like that. And he was a painter, paper hanger. One of the guys that had the old 2-wheel cart that they'd push from job to job. And then the next corner south of me, Win Pearson lived there. He was a town justice. God help you if you got called up in front of him. He was something else. And that house was actually made from 2 houses. The 2 houses put together. Somebody, I don't know what it is, just wanted a bigger house or what. And then the next corner, that house was built in the 30s for Mrs. Fry for her retirement. And I used to deliver a post-standard paper to her. She was a very nice lady, lived alone, and got along real well. And then the next one was the old stone house where Casefalo lived. There was a fellow who lived there, Major Lawton. And he was tighter than hell. I used to deliver paper to him, and he got me to shovel his driveway out once. Oh, once was it. I shoveled that driveway all the way up around the house, out to the barn, and I got paid the lump sum of 50 cents. Never again. Then we come to what is now our museum. That was the Presbyterian Church. That was the church my grandmother was organist. And I used to go to church with her and sit up on the organ bench behind the preacher. Had to be on my good behavior on those days. Then the next place was owned by Jenny Yager, I believe. And it was out in back that my dad, he spaded up her garden for her when my dad was a kid. And he found this glass bottle. And he offered to give it to her. She said, she said, we've got 3 or 4 of them around. She said, you can have it. So Dad hung on to it. And it was an old, I can't remember the terminology, but it was a hand-blown bottle, and it had "Success to the Railroad" imprinted on it. Well, that was part of my trip to Germany to see Jim. Jackie sold that bottle for $300. I could hardly believe it. Let's see where, yeah. Okay, and then the next place over is where, well, that's where George Fordyce lived. And then eventually Marshall Act, his wife lived there. I'm not sure who lives there now. And then down on the next corner was a brick house, and that was owned by the Richardson, I believe. I don't know too much about it. And then the next corner was the Episcopal Church, and just south of the church there was a house where the pastor lived.